Hey, what's going on, y'all? Back with another one, back with another one, back with another one, back with another one. Back with it, back with it. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? This is the Utilitarian versus Deontology. Pretty much what you see in the series. I just brought you my Wednesday content like I normally with my actual content. Um, I'm gonna touch on this again. I'm gonna show you the information and things like that. It's pretty much, just a battle of two ideologies. One deals with the greatest happiness of the greatest number. One deals with duty and things like that. So it's pretty much what you see. And let's see. Let me get some formalities for a minute. Pretty much it. Pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. It's pretty much it. So we're pretty much talking about the ideology of that too. Two of the ideologies that came from. I think Immanuel Kant does the deontology. That means the duty. It's the opposite of utilitarianism. So what's the difference between the two? They're under this consequential moralist ideology, and I talk about this in the basics. And so we're going to bring that out as well. We got to bring the utilitarian basics, different branches, movement. So it's pretty much hit or miss on this one, but we're going to get in deontology on the other one. So it's like one thing I can say, I talk about it a lot in the beginning of last year. Last year I talked about this a lot right around this time and early of last year around the winter I was talking about utilitarianism. I was actually pushing against a certain individual I don't mess with now. Um he tried to conflate the two, think he's black pill utilitarian. So it's basically what you see now. It's pretty much what you see now, and I try to bring this content like last year, trying to push this forward and try to understand and get the actual, since the younger generation need to know. And I'm glad I'm doing this stream because I can have the arguments as well. Just some more content added to my arsenal. Just I just want to put this certain things out. So let's see who's in the chat. Okay. Hey Leticia, what's going on? What's going on? And it's pretty much, you see what you can get. So yeah, I'm gonna cancel. It's pretty much it. Pretty much it. I know people are seeing what's going on. Yeah. Let me get my notifications out. It's pretty much, let's see real quick. I know people are upset and things like that. I don't really give a shit. It's gonna focus on me right now. All right, for the formalities, I'm gonna add something real quick. Pretty much Chrome and tab. Let's go with the difference between the two. We're gonna talk about this. We're gonna stay on this a little bit, and then we'll get into the formalities. Okay, I talk about this before a lot. Okay, utilitarianism versus deontology. Let me see real quick. Let me take myself out the screen. I'll make the screen bigger for y'all. Does it maximize? Yeah. Let me maximize it. I'm still on the panel. Okay. Let me maximize. Okay. Utilitarianism versus deontology. Though people tend to be considered the two terms utilitarianism and deontology as similar, they always think, but there are certain differences between the two terms. These are associated with the morality, but in fact, they are two different schools of thought, which is facts. True. Two different schools of thought. Immanuel Kant is a deontologist, and the utilitarian philosophers you would see would be like a John Stuart Mill or Jeremy Bentham. There's so many. It's about 6 of them, by the way. But deontology, pretty much not much. So, two different schools of thought regarding morality. Okay, according to utilitarianism, utility is all about the result of action. However, in deontology, the end does not justify the means. That's what deontology is. This can be identified as the main difference between the two concepts. This article attempts to highlight the differences between the two terms while explaining the two concepts. And I always said what is utilitarianism is, and I just said it. I just said the two individuals' names. Believes in the concept of the end justify the means as a matter of fact, and the terms was used by the philosophers John Stuart Mill, typically liberal, by the way, and Jeremy Bentham. This is all England Victorian periods. You hear this concept. They actually birthed feminism, by the way. A lot of you dudes don't even know that. It is interesting interesting to note that according to utilitarianism, utility is all about the result of an action. Hence, the followers of utilitarianism school of morality give more value to the outcome of an action. Thus, consequently, becomes very important in the school of thought. Healthcare follows the utilitarianism principles. Let's read this part again. Healthcare follows the utilitarianism principles to a greater extent. You see, they talk about the healthcare system follows that concept, which is true. Which is true. Most certain liberal societies has a little bit of utilitarianism in it. And the problem with that is you see that around the world because most people don't know utilitarianism did birth liberalism. It birthed feminism and all form. And I mentioned this before in my streams last year. If y'all watched my old stuff on utilitarianism, when I broke down on several streams, it's got an interconnection with it. So yeah, and I always talk about it a lot. I have one of my playlists talk about utilitarianism, and it's pretty much the same old, same old. So you see this a lot, and I think people just don't understand that utilitarianism is one of the main key factors of what you see and what you get. So it's like you see this, it's pretty much in. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing about utilitarianism, in a nutshell. And a lot of people say it's in some military aspect. Yes, some. If you have a Republican leader, yeah, they practice liberalism on the low. They're not really conservative. Conservatives, they just want to conserve their energy. They construct, and that's it. But change of construction keeps rebuilding. Liberals like to construct, but they're not really that conservative. They're just really out there. But they do have a nationalistic view. Most utilitarians usually be like that. They always preaching the greatest happiness of the greatest number. That's their concept. That's when you hear that. And that's a liberal concept, by the way. But technically, liberal concepts are also utilitarian concepts. They intertwine with each other. So they're in the same family. That's where you get socialism, communism, and under that umbrella. It birthed a lot of those systems, and people use their concepts. That's why utilitarianism exists today. That's like the return base of foundation of people. The human species. They always use this concept. And then the opposite of this is nihilism. So, that's a whole nother argument right there. I was trying to push that as well. There is a belief that the philosopher thinks that the implements of ideas that more selfish in the utilitarianism school of thought. Another important characteristic in utilitarianism is that it does not pay special attention to the codes of conduct. The stress is laid on the end of the means of getting there, becomes the only secondary. In such a concept, the attention paid to the manner in which a goal is achieved is insignificant. But this is why one can comment that utilitarianism does not stress the code of conduct. However, when paying attention to deontology is a different in comparison to utilitarianism. There you go. And that's pretty much what you see and what you get. And this is John Stuart Mill. He adopted Jeremy Bentham's ideology. Him and his wife created liberalism. Quiet as is kept, if you want to get technical. Because they use the same utilitarian concepts 95% of the time. Most people say feminism was created by certain movies. True, but it all came from utilitarianism if you really want to get technical historically. The ideals are the same. So, yeah. They said, what is deontology? So we got Immanuel Kant here, the famous Immanuel Kant. He's the opposite of utilitarianism, or as we're speaking today. Deontology is exactly the opposite of utilitarianism. I just spoke it. When it comes to explanations of the concepts, deontology does not believe in the concept of the end justify the means. On the other hand, it says the end does not justify the means. This is the main difference between utilitarianism and deontology. Another important difference between the two schools of thought regarding ethical behavior is that utilitarianism is more consequence oriented in character. On the other hand, deontology is not consequence oriented in nature. It is totally dependent on scriptures. Interesting. Scriptures, like they say. Uh-oh, here we go. Thus, it can be understood that deontology following scriptures that show significant light on the rules of conduct or moral rules, intuition. The meaning of the word deontology is the study of duty. This word derived from the Greek words dion logos. It is important to know that deontology insists that the ethical importance of both the action and the consequence, one of the finest principles included in the schools of thought of deontology, is that every action should be characterized by morality. It is the morality of an action that can determine the morality of its outcome. Deontology says that the action is not moral in character or nature, then the outcome too cannot be moral or ethical. This is one of the important principles laid down by the ethical school of thought called deontology. Deontology takes the universally accepted codes of conduct into account. On the other hand, utilitarianism does not universally accept codes of conduct into account. These are the important differences between in the two schools of thought regarding morality, namely utilitarianism and deontology. Here you go. Immanuel Kant. What is the difference between utilitarianism and deontology? Deontology does not believe in the concepts of the end justify the means, whereas utilitarianism does. My fault. Utilitarianism is more consequence oriented in character, but the deontology is not consequence oriented in nature. Deontology takes the universally accepted codes of conduct into an account, whereas utilitarianism does not take universally accepted codes of conduct into an account. And it says John and right here. So it's pretty much what I'm saying right here. So I'm going to give y'all this meat. Y'all can read this for yourselves if y'all like a copy. I'm going to put this in the live chat. And it's pretty much what I see right now. And that's pretty much it. So, yeah. Are utilitarian deontological preference unidimensional? I don't want to play. Are preferences unidimensional? They were saying, okay. Utilitarian versus deontology inclinations be studied extensively in the field of moral psychology. Yeah, I accept. Move on. Okay. However, the field that has been lacking a thorough psychometric evaluation of most commonly used measures. In this paper, we examine the factual structures of an often used set of 12 moral dilemmas, purportedly measuring the utilitarian deontological moral inclinations. We ran 3 different studies and a pilot to investigate the issue. In the study, in study 1, we used the standard exploratory factor analysis and skimmed liminin or G factor analysis results of which in the inform a prior single factor model for our second study. Results of confirmatory and factor analysis in study 2 were replicated in study 3. Finally, we ran weak invariance in the analysis between the models of the study 2 and study 3 concluded that there's no significant difference between the factor loading in these studies, but we find reasons to support single factor model of utilitarianism and deontological inclinations, but in addition, in certain dilemmas, have consistent error covariance in suggesting that this should be taken into consideration in future studies. In conclusion, 3 studies pilot in invariance analysts systematically suggest that the following: no item needs to be dropped from scale. There is a unidimensional structure for utilitarian deontological preference behind the most often used dilemmas in moral psychology, suggested in single latent cognitive mechanisms, but the most common set of dilemmas in moral psychology can be successfully used as a unidimensional measures of utilitarianism, deontological moral inclinations, but would benefit using weighted averages over simple averages. Consideration should be given in dilemmas in describing infants. Okay. Utilitarianism is a philosophy stating the aggregated welfare of a good it should be the maximized and the suffering or bad should be minimized. It is usually contrast with with deontological philosophy, which states that there were inviolable moral rules, but that does not change depending on the situation. Green, 2007B, from Utilitarian and all that other stuff. Okay, this is the introduction. Okay. Yeah, it's a long read. So it's giving you the introduction. Okay. This is the frontiersin.org. Let's go with the study. We collected a small sample to test if our initiatives of subjects regarding the unidimensional structure behind the dilemmas would be supported. We further aim to make sure that our analysts we would an empirical foundation. Ethical statement right here. Ethical statement. All local laws regarding ethics for social science research, we fall in full. All participation was fully voluntarily, and participants were informed about their right to opt out at any point without penalties. All materials and study protocol were reviewed and approved by the University of Helsinki Ethical Review and Broad in Humanities and Social Behavioral Sciences. Methods, participants in procedure. 57 Finnish people were recruited to anonymous internet study on Facebook. No identified information, not even gender, was collected. After providing the informational consent, participants read the instructions and responded to 12 moral dilemmas using a 7-point Likert scale. Green in 2008. Okay. Materials, moral preferences measured. We use the 12 high conflict moral dilemmas to adopt from ETA. Participant was instructed to assume the role of the moral agent in the scenario. But the moral dilemmas deal with the different topics from military emergencies to trekking accidents and even situations where the agent has considered sacrificing their own child. Each of the dilemma describes a morally ambiguous situations where the moral agent has to judge how acceptable is to kill or injure one person in order to save multiple or others, or to prevent a person from suffering more inevitable death. Utilitarian option in each dilemma has a moral agent carried to harm out with their own hands. Pushing person off of a footbridge in front of a trolley. All questions were framed in the following manner. However, acceptable is in for you to do X. Push by bystander of the footbridge. All questions were anchored from not all acceptable to 7 totally acceptable by conventional standards. But the sacrifice and dilemmas had a good entered item reliability. Since the crop box A is known as to have a psychometric problems. We also calculated Tarkanians and for the items and their internal reliability, which indicated acceptable internal consistency as well. Results of pilot study. Theoretically, we assumed that there would only be one of the dilemmas, which was suggested by Tarcom's. We ran a parallel analysis to confirm this. Based on the even value criteria, the recommendation is one factor based on the optimal coordinates. Acceleration factor in parallel analysis recommendations was also a single factor solution. We also ran the maximum likelihood estimated exploratory factor analysis with a very max rotation on our pilot data. According to the analyst, in all items and loaded on a single factor, all loadings with an even value of 6.6, while the next possible extracted factor have an even value of 0.85. And we concluded that the small pilot data suggests that it was pursuing a single factor solutions for the factor of structure of the 12 most common dilemmas in the field moral psychology. For an example of a graphical presentation for parallel analysts, see the results of study. So pretty much study one, and we just read the materials and the results of the pilot study. The study we're gonna read study one. Study one. Since our pilot was once whole, it's an ad hoc online study, we decided to collected a large laboratory data is conjunction with the experiments reported elsewhere, assuming the laboratory data would be less noisy, more uniformly controlled environment. Uniformly controlled environment that was we would have, and we will have in an online questionnaires. That's pretty much the method. Participants and procedure. Participants were recruited through the social media and from public libraries to the city of the Helsinki 156, the 156, the 65 male to ages 26 to 83 SD, in 88 to 81 range, 18 to 62. But people participating in laboratory experiments were they Philly in the moral dilemmas in the conjunction, and others takes an unrelated to the aims of this study. Evaluating emotions and faces and other emotional intelligence tasks. All dilemmas were presented in a fully randomized order. Participant answers the dilemmas in their native language, and we were compensated an average of 2.5 Celsius for their time. Materials. We use the same materials as the pilot study above. For full descriptions of materials, see the pilot study and supplementary material. By the conventional standards, and the high conflict dilemmas had a good inner item reliability. We also calculated the Tarkonian and 0.882, which is indicated acceptable in internal consistency as well. Theoretically, we assume that we would only be one factor, are also suggested by Tarkians, and additionally, we ran a parallel analysis to confirm this result. Based on the even value creation criteria and the recommendations was two factors, and based on optimal uh, coordinates in our acceleration and factor and parallel analysis on one factor. See figure one. Parallel axis figure one, they animated, and then they did table studies, of course. So it's pretty much what we see, in this result here. So, it's pretty much, I don't see how much time I got, pretty much in. Yeah. And don't try to shut my shit down. Yeah, don't try to shoot my shit down. I don't deal with that. I don't deal with that. I was looking at my stream deck. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. I'll be right back, y'all. Yeah, I'm back at it again. Hold on. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, the internet's fine. Good, good. I saw that shit. I was like, what the fuck? Don't you do it, Restrings. The results of the unrotated two in the three factor solutions indicate that there will only be one factor on which all the items is loaded with decent values from 0.45 to 0.77, whereas the other loadings and the other factors that would be relatively weak. 0.42 various max and pro max rotation suggests that the second factor would consist of four items: crying baby, footbridge, sacrifice, Sophie's choice. Three out of these four items deal with the situations where the participants had to think about sacrificing children, own or not. However, since the footbridge dilemma has nothing to do with children, there's no theoretical reasons to separate these four items from the other eight. Varimax rotated three-dimensional solutions was the most ambiguous theoretically, but this solution suggests that the euthanasias, euthanasias life, boat, and safari and submarine dilemmas would be one factor, and four dilemmas and were extracted in previous solutions: crying baby, footbridge, sacrifice, and Sophie's choice would be consist of one factor with all the rest. Lawrence of Arabia, commonly used, I know the story. Lawrence of Arabia and terrorist son, vaccine, and vitamins, forming the third factor. We could not find any substantially meaningful interpretations for the solution, since it also have two relatively strong cross loadings. More specifically, the footbridge dilemma was the association with the child sacrifice. Dilemmas is with the factor consisting of Lawrence of Arabia, terrorist son, and vaccine and vitamin C, also the loadings for the Safari dilemma. The Promax rotated three factor solutions was a meaningful since it suggested that the three dilemmas involving child sacrifice, crying baby, sacrifice, Sophie's choice, formed a single factor. And the two dilemmas embedded in the military context, euthanasia and submarine, would form another factor, with all the other dilemmas forming a third factor. Finally, we ran into the skimming and limiting factor. Analysts with Promax rotation, assuming that there would be a general factor behind the suggested two and three factor models to investigate if any of these item loading on the sub factors rather than on the general utilitarianism factor. In our analysis, we found that for both the two and the three factor solutions, the G factor had the largest even val, 4.15 to 4.08 respectively. Only factor in the two factor solutions had the even val slightly bigger than the indicating marginally possible independent factor. However, since all the items in the factors have a strong loadings on the G factor, there's no reason to separate factors from one another. All the other factors have an even val smaller than one, indicating that the subfactors contains less information than the original items and thus supporting the single factor solutions, table 3. Furthermore, none of the items loaded more on the subfactors on the general factor. Yeah, like you said, and they show the table factor right here and the limit right here and here. Discusses the results of study 1 and the dilemmas. They talk about study 2, and it's pretty much, I'm not going to read all this. Y'all can read half of this, but I'll give you this meat as well. This is a second link to this. I ain't got much time, so this is a normal 2 hour thing. So it's pretty much, I'm saying right quick. And I'm just like that. And they try to say, oops, your streams is like, they try to say that shit. And I'm just like, I'm not with that. So it's pretty much, I'm just gonna be in here, and I'm not trying to make sure that that's here. As many. All right. Let's see what this is about. It's pretty much it. And difference between the two versus morality, there are several schools of thoughts. They added in. I was looking at this. I'm just looking at, it's pretty much what you see and what you get. And you see this a lot. So yeah, you hear the white noise. So I'm just saying it like this, but mainly I'm just not, I'm not gonna hear no interference or anything. I'm just gonna speak this lightly. So yeah, it's gonna be an hour and a half, and then we're gonna get 2 hours. I'll read something else. So we see this theory. There's a difference between the two. So it's not pretty much, I just give y'all the meat, and I'm gonna drop this down, and let's talk about utilitarianism in a minute. So we're gonna get into the actual thing, what it is, and why is it important, and why I talk about it. Well, utilitarianism is basically the greatest happiness is the greatest number. I show you for the philosophy basics. I can drop that, and then I'm gonna drop y'all deontology. I'm gonna go in that instead. I'm gonna show you. Y'all seen these before. Y'all seen this. Probably got it saved. Whatever. I done provided links for these and whatever. But it's pretty much what I've been saying last year. A certain individual, he called himself the master teacher or grand master. I don't fuck with dudes like that, and I can count them with this shit all day. They conflate shit in these so-called spheres. These niggas ain't shit. Very inconsistent and emotional. But with that, I'd say to hell with them. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to say I'm the smartest person on here. I know I am, but I ain't trying to broadcast no bullshit on here either. I show consistency on here, but anyhow, I don't know why they advertising that damn mic. That's crazy. What? I'm gonna let them live. Okay, I already mentioned the introduction with this and the moral worth that action is solely determined by its contribution, maximize utility. Of course, they always say that hedonism. This nigga said this ain't hedonistic. Utilitarianism is very hedonistic, by the way. It's all in the same. Consequentialism, of course, virtual ethics, then Epicurus or Epicureanism. He tried to conflate this, that didn't work. And it's the origins of utilitarian. We're gonna read this again. The origins of utilitarianism are often traced back to Epicureanism of the followers of the Greek philosopher Epicurus. See, I'll show you Epicurus. Because see, this is nothing new. This thing is new. It's still a liberal concept, intertwined with each other. There's Epicureanism, the Hellenistic period, epistemology, Empiricus, and his ethics of hedonistic. See, this is the dudes is talking about. That's what creates America a little bit. That's super liberal like that, right? But it's still Epicureanism and its foundation. I talked about this as well on several streams last year. Epicurus, asceticism, and I can go on and on about these concept philosophies all day because a lot of people don't explain things to the younger generation. See, what these niggas do, they don't like I do. They don't explain things proper context that birthed a lot of liberal concepts, especially this one. And it needs to be talked about way more than ever. Yeah, I talk about politics, I talk about philosophy. I also talk about the actual history. Things are interconnected. It repeats itself over and over again. Nothing is new under the sun. I know everybody hates that. Nothing is new under the sun. Period. So it's pretty much what you see and what you get. So I'm not really surprised with people just not acting the way they are. And I'm happy the fact that this is happening, because I like doing this type of content, and I normally do a versus series of these two. Of course, they have Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, of course, and Liberty, and the criticism of. We're going to talk about the criticisms of utilitarianism. I'm the same one here. And it has been argued measuring the comparing happiness among different people is impossible, not only in practice, but in principle. Defenders argue that the same problem is successfully overcome in everyday life, that the rough estimates are usually significant. Another dilemma of utilitarianism is that the pleasure of the sadist should have the same importance as the pleasure of an altruist. Although proponents have countered that sadists are relatively few and so their effective influence would be minimal. And that hurt suffered by others would be counterbalanced. Any pleasure registered by the sadist, furthermore, the sadist pleasure is superficial and temporary. That's how they think. Thus, it is detrimental to the sadist's long-term well-being. Another argument is that sometimes a long time is needed to weigh all the evidence and reach in a defined conclusion on the relatively consist of benefits of an action. Utilitarians admit that certain knowledge of consequence is sometimes impossible, but argue the best estimates of consequence or predictions based on the past are usually significant. A very specific argument against utilitarianism has been put forth on the grounds that determinism is either true or false. If it's true, then we have no real choice over our actions. If it is false, then the questions of our actions are unpredictable, not least because they will depend on the actions of others whom we cannot predict. Utilitarianism has been criticized for only looking at the results of actions, not at the desire or intentions which motivate them, which many people also consider important. Thus, an action intended to cause harm, but the inadvertently causes good results, would be judged equal to the result of an action done with good intentions. Utilitarians may argue that justification of slavery, torture, or mass murder would require unrealistic large benefits to outweigh to the direct extreme suffering to the victims, as well as taking into consideration indirect impact of social acceptance of inhuman policies. General anxiety and fear might increase for all if human rights are commonly ignored. Other critics have made objections to the following to the right and wrong, the dichotomy implicated in utilitarianism, whereby good and charitable donations may be branded a wrong action. If there's any alternative donation to a significant, efficient charity, utilitarianism does not make an account of the fact that human nature is dynamic and changing. So the concept of single utility for all humans is one dimensional and not useful. Utilitarians have no ultimate justification for primarily valuing pleasure other than the tautological on that is the way it should be. Some consequentialists consider although happiness and an important consequence of the consequence such as just equality should be valued, taken into consideration regardless of whether they increase happiness or not. See, that's what liberalism was birthed out of. Yes, it has a little determinism, but what you just see I just read, it's pretty much like it birthed the liberal concept. That's pretty much it. So yeah, so yeah, look at this. Oh, yeah. Okay, types of utilitarianism act. Utilitarian's case of states. That's the act. I talked about this before. I talked about the rule. It's choice. We must look. Um, and potential rules determine whether they generalize procedure and happiness otherwise. That's the rule. Utilitarians and act is potential actions, particular. They're very similar. Act utilitarian and rule utilitarian. Then you got the two-level utilitarians. It's intuitive thinking. Some to rule utilitarianism. I mentioned this before. Motive utilitarianism. That's motive within other ourselves. The spectrum. Initial more times motive utilitarianism. Then they got the total utilitarianism, advocates the measuring the utility of population based on total utility of its members. However, it has been argued that it leads to repugnant conclusion, which in an enormous population where the individual lives are barely worth living is considered preferable to a small population with good lives. That's total. I talk about this many times too. Then the average utilitarianism advocates measuring utility population based on average utility of that population. Drawback here is known as the mere addition to the paradox. I mentioned this a lot too on several pre-records and streams. Negative utilitarianism justification. Critics argue that it aims negative utilitarians, therefore logically to engender the quickest and least painful method of killing entirely of humanity. So that's pretty much negative. And then you got the synoded utilitarianism, of course, well being all sentient beings and conscious being who feels pain, including therefore some non-human animals deserve equal consideration with that given to human beings when making moral decisions in utilitarian context. So that's pretty much it on utilitarianism. And then, we're going to get in deontology for a minute. I'm gonna stop sharing this and pretty much get into its rival. So we're pretty much, let me see something real quick. Yeah. To prevent harm others. Principles of liberalism, libertarian, some Marxist philosopher. I forgot to read y'all this part. And also have used principles and arguments for socialism. Classic utilitarianism of Bentham and Mill influenced many other moral philosophers' development of many different types of consequentialism. Yep. And they mentioned liberalism and libertarianism, and some Marxists use their philosophy. I try to tell you, utilitarianism and Epicureanism goes way back. They use these concepts, and that's what created liberalism. So it's pretty much what you see, what you get with this ideology. And I talk about this a lot because it needs to be talked about. This ain't racial. This is very you see in politics too. It's always going to be pushed. It's always going to be pushed in certain levels. And you got to understand, this is the type of shit that you see a lot, you know, and it's pretty much the same if you really get technical with it. So, and it's just like I said, man. It's just like I said, I've seen this a lot. Let me see, consequentialist. So it's pretty much I'm seeing this right now. That was a weak storm. We're gonna get into deontology in a minute. We're just gotta get this set up real quick. What's going on, TC Killer? T Church, what's going on, man? Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Not going to respond to anything. Okay. Okay, this is the movement, ethics, political philosophy in the 19th century England, which proposed to the greatest good for the greatest number as the overriding rule in the moral decision. And you see that, and this is another part. This is the movement aspect. We already dealt with the introduction of it, and they said the moral warfare idea is solely determined by its contribution overall utility in maximizing happiness or pleasure as a summon among all people, i.e., the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. That's why people always talk utilitarianism, that concept. And liberals believe this as well, too. Don't let those liberal Republicans lie to y'all. Liberal Democrats do not exist. I will say most Republicans are still liberal. So do not let them lie to you in public that they do believe this concept. They want the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So they have a utilitarian concept all the time. All Republicans are not conservative. Most of them are modern, moderate and liberal because they believe in a utilitarian concept. That's pretty much what you see in most Republicans that have a lot of money. Don't let them lie to y'all. They try to lie to people's face, and then I can pull this research. Y'all represent this concept. They said intrinsically this valuable, and anything else can be value in causing happiness and preventing suffering. See the actions of doctrine of utilitarianism for more details. See, we ain't gonna get into that. This focuses on happiness or pleasure as the ultimate end of the moral decision, makes utilitarianism a type of a hedonism, and is sometimes known as hedonistic utilitarianism. So they call it hedonistic utilitarianism, and its origins often trace back to Epicureanism. We just talked about it, of the followers of the Greek philosopher Epicurus. It can be argued that David Hume and Edmund Burke were pro-utilitarians. They're popularly used too. David Hume and Edmund Burke got it from Epicurus in the doctrine, and that's what you would have utilitarianism in the 19th century. Back in ancient Greece and all that, Epicurus was a standard. It is the same thing, same concept, same principles. So it's pretty much the same thing. As specific school of thought, however, utilitarianism is generally credited to English philosopher, social reformer. Let's read this part again. As specifically as a specific school of thought, however, utilitarianism is generally credited to English philosopher, social reformer Jeremy Bentham. Bentham found pain and pleasure to be the only intrinsic values in the world. And from his derived the rule of utility, that the good is whatever brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. That's his concept. Bentham himself, however, attributed to the origins of the theory to Joseph Priestley, 1733 1804, the English scientist, theologian, and founder of Unitarianism. Unitarianism in England. So Joseph Priestley, Unitarianism, also, he called it utilitarianism. Unitarianism was this guy. Utilitarianism, we're going to talk about this in the future. I might do it's like the Unitarianism, not utilitarianism, but utilitarianism. These philosophy aspects. We'll see what comes up. It's a form of Christianity that denies the doctrine of the Trinity. Wow. That's oh, it talks about Christianity. Okay. It's no need. We're gonna say fuck that. We're not gonna talk about that. So let's move it on. Yeah, Bentham's foremost proponents was James Mill. James Mill, 1773, 1836, and his son John Stuart Mill, known as Jim Mill. His son, his father is James Mill, known as Jim Mill, and then you got John Stuart Mill, the famous John Stuart Mill. He deals with the quality utilitarianism, and I talk about that as well in most of these playlists. And the utilitarianism playlists that y'all need to look at, I've already talked about this stuff. This is nothing new, and you can look at several contents of that. I actually did a playlist on that, and I believe it's a good one y'all should look at. It's educational, broke down a few things, and it's pretty much, I got links and bookmarks of this stuff, and I can read that off to you all the time. So it's pretty much the same. I got links for days, man. I got links for days for actual content and things like that. So it's pretty much you're seeing this in what you get and what you see all the time. So it's pretty much you just like, okay, I see this a lot, and then you just like, okay, you know, it's the weather right now. Let's see how much temperature doesn't drop. Oh, it dropped significantly. Yeah. Yeah, I knew it's gonna drop. The chances is down. 32%. Yeah, it's gonna be tomorrow. Oh, it's gonna be hot tomorrow. Woo! I see why Thursday's hot. Yeah, it's gonna be hot tomorrow. Jesus. It's gonna be 77 degrees tonight. It's gonna be 80 degrees. God damn, it's gonna be hot. Shit, it's gonna be hot all the way through. Yeah, Saturday's gonna be hot. It's gonna be 89. It's gonna be good. Hell yeah. Well, hot spring is almost over. We got next week. I'll be gone next week. Y'all enjoy y'all summer. I'll be back on the 24th of last year. I mean, not last year, but this year. I mean, excuse me. In July. So it's pretty much you see what you can get. Not last year, but yeah, this year I'm going to enjoy the summer, and then I'll come back in July on the tail end in August. You know, y'all gonna see me. I'll be around. I'll be posting some articles in my community tab. Let you know I'm still active. I'm just, just taking a long break from doing content. So y'all see me back. So it's pretty much, yeah. In his origins principles, he argued culture, intellectual and spiritual pleasures of greatest value, and mere physical pleasures and values, and by competent judge, according to Mill. It's Liberty Essays, of course. And then here's the philosophers right here. There's 6 of them, I believe. And one's an animal lover, and I believe his name is Peter Sanger, 1946. He's a utilitarian. And it says other notable utilitarians. And let's read this part down here. He requires many arrangements to satisfy liberty principle, harm people. Okay, harm principle, according to which only purpose which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of civilized communities against his will to prevent the harm of others is the cornerstone of principles of, like I said, we just talked about liberalism, libertarianism, and some Marxist philosophers have also used these principles as arguments for socialism. I just talked about that. It's also on the one, if you talk about utilitarianism as well. And here's the philosophers. After Bentham, Mill included Henry Sidgwick. I talked about him this before. I talked about it on several streams before I even had the actual gear to prepare for this. And G.E. Moore, Bertrand Russell, Richard Hare, 1919 to 2002. And then you got J.C. Smart, 1920 to 2012. He's gone. And then you got Peter Sanger still alive. He's the last one. So you got one, two, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 or 7. I forgot. It was 6 at first. It was Peter Singer, but they mentioned other guys. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 philosophers, 6 to 8 philosophers, with the main ones you already know. It's a lot of them, more than that, but it's really less. It ain't that many nihilists. It's a lot of nihilists. Excuse me. It's a lot of nihilists. I think I showed y'all the picture of them, but it's a lot of. It's not that many utilitarians. It's only 8. The top 8 that people know that's actually practice the philosophy. So it's pretty much it. Um, like I said, if y'all want this, I'll put this. If someone's new, I'm gonna put this in the chat as well. So I'm gonna dump this off in here, and it's pretty much what you see, what you get, and yeah, I'm gonna put this in here. So it's pretty much good. So yeah, so the hour is gonna be coming up in a minute. Hey, what's going on, Mike? Salute, salute, salute. Pretty much it. Pretty much it. So I'm going to knock this off and put a new tab. Okay. It's pretty much, you get into it and you just like, I'm not going to just bark at people and just act crazy, but, just going to deal with that in a second. Now, the main section, you already know the difference between the two, and I'll put these in the chats if y'all want to be highlighted and things like that. So it's pretty much see what you can get. Talked about that. Talked about pretty things and pretty much. And then I talk about what I've gotten up here. So Yeah, let me boost this up a little bit. Okay, introduction. Deontology or deontological ethics is an approach to ethics that focus on rightness or wrongness of actions themselves as opposed to the rightness or wrongness of the consequence of those actions. Consequentialism or the character and habits of the actor, virtue ethics. Okay, so we're talking about deontology or deontologicalists. Yeah, yeah, deontologicalists or deontology, basically. We're talking about deontological ethics. That's what we're talking about. We'll talk about this right here. Thus, the deontologist, whether a situation is good or bad, depends on whether the action that brought is about was right or wrong. What makes a choice? Right is a conformity with a moral norm. Right takes priority over good. For example, if someone proposed to kill everyone currently living on the land could not support agriculture in order to bring about a world without starvation. Deontologists would argue that this world without starvation was a bad state of affairs because of the way in which was brought about. A consequentialist would or could argue that the final state of affairs justified the drastic action. Virtue ethics would concern himself with neither, but would look at the whether the perpetrator acted in accordance with worthy virtues. That's how they look at it. Deontology may sometimes be considered with moral absolutism. That's why I'm not a deontologist. The belief that some actions are wrong no matter what consequence follow from them, but not necessarily. For instance, Immanuel Kant famously argued that it's also wrong to lie, or even a murderer is asking for the location of a potential victim, but others, such as W.D. Rose, 1877 1971, hold that consequence of actions such as lying may sometimes make in lying the right thing to do. Moral relativism. I talked about this recently. I think this year, relativism. I talked about that recently in certain streams on Wednesday. Y'all can look back on political systems, I believe. Sometimes describes as duty based on obligation based on ethics because the deontologists, deontologists, yeah, excuse me, deontologists believe that the ethical rules bind people to their duty. But the term deontology derives from the Greek deon, meaning obligation or duty, and logos, meaning speaking or study, and what first used in this way 1930 in the book of Five Types of Ethical Theory by CD Board 1887 1971. Yeah, 1887 1971. Here we go. Kant's categorical imperative. Modern deontological ethics was introduced by Immanuel Kant in the late 18th century with his theory of the categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant defined the imperative as any proposition that declares a certain action or inaction to be necessary. A hypothetical imperative would be combined action in a given circumstance. If I wish to satisfy my thirst, I must drink something. A categorical imperative would be denote an absolute, unconditional requirement that exerts an authority in all circumstances, both required, justified as an end in itself. He argued that the highest good must be both intrinsically good, good in self, and good without qualifications. When the additions of that thing never makes a situation ethically worse, he concluded that there is only one thing that is truly good, a good will chosen out of the feeling of moral duty. From this concept of duty, Kant derived what he called a categorical imperative in principle that is intrinsically valid, good in itself. that must be obeyed in all all situations and circumstances if our behavior is observed moral laws. He considered an unconditional obligation regardless of our will or desires, regardless of any consequence which might arise from the action. He also believed that if any action is not done with motive of duty, then it is without moral value and therefore meaningless. Kant developed his moral philosophy in three works. Ground's work of the metaphysics of morals, 1785, Critique of the Practical Reasons, 1788, and the Metaphysics of Morals, 1797. He formulated in three different ways. The act only is such a way that you would want your actions to become universal law applicable to everyone in a similar situation. Act in such a way that you will always treat humanity, whether oneself or other, as both the means of an action, but also as an end. Act as though you were a lawmaking member, also the king of a hypothetical kingdom of ends, and therefore only in a such way would harmonize with such a kingdom if those laws were binding on all others. Criticisms of deontology. Criticism of deontology. As you might add, there is criticism of deontology. Oh, deontology. Okay. Robert Nozick, 1938, 2002, famously points on what has become known as the paradox of deontology, that deontology forbids some acts that maximize welfare overall. The example usually used that of a trolley hurling towards five innocent and immobile people at the end of the track, where the only way to stop the trolley is to save the five is to throw one innocent bystander in front of the trolley. But the principle of permissible harm in deontology rules out deliberately throwing a person in front of the trolley. But the consequence of that is that five innocent bystanders die, which also contravenes the principles of permissible harm. That's a fair argument by Robert Zowick. This is a Nozick right here. I'll give you this whole thing, and y'all can get in more detail and research the rest. Keep this as a bookmark as your foundation, and I'll give y'all. You can research the rest about these individuals. Utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham has criticized deontology on the grounds that it is essentially dressed up version of a popular morality, that the objective and unchanging principles that the deontolo- deontologists attributes to natural law or universal reasons are really just a matter of subjective opinion. See, that's a fair argument in his point. A lot of them are fair arguments, but they're very similar, but they're in that type of motion. John Stuart Mill, another 19th century utilitarian, argued that the deontologists usually fail to specify which principles should take priority when rights and duties conflict, so that deontology cannot offer complete moral guidance. Mill also criticized Kant's claims for his categorical imperative, arguing that is really just another way of saying that the ends justify the means, which is essentially a consequentialist argument. Some critics have attempted to show that the constraints, e.g., requirement not to murder, for example, are invariably immoral, but then to show that the options, e.g., the right not to give money to charity without constraints, are also immoral. I mean, the right interference. Okay. That buzzing. Bzzz. Okay. Other types of deontology: divine common theory from formal deontology, de- deontological theory, which states as an action is right if God has decreed that it is right, and the act is obli- obligatory if only if it was only if it became is commanded by God. But thus moral obligations arise from God's commands, and the rightness of any action depends on upon the actions being performed because it's a duty, not because of any good consequence arising from the actions. Therefore, if God commands people not to work on the Sabbath, for example, then people act rightly if they do not work on the Sabbath, but solely because of God has commanded it. If they do not work on the Sabbath because they are lazy, then their actions is not truly speaking right, even though the actual physical action performed is the same. William Achman and Rene Descartes in 18th century Calvinists all accept the versions of the moral theory. William Achman, of course, are Plato's and all that. So it's pretty much what you see, what you get. So that's deontology. I didn't want to go in depth on it. So it's pretty much the same concept as we all copied. And it's pretty much what you see, what you get. So, and I'm just like out here, post this base. Put this right here. So I'm not really tripping off what's going on. So, yeah, we're an hour in. So we with this right. We're gonna get this right. So around 10, I'm just like, we're gonna end it or whatever. So it's pretty much, I'm just saying that that's it. You know, yeah, I might go another hour. This is gonna be 2 hours. So we're pretty much in the ballpark. So I feel like when we talk about deontology, we talk about that's just part of it, and we're just gonna get this part of the stream. So, and let's talk about Immanuel Kant for a minute. Let's talk about him for a minute. And I know he's the father of deontology, and we saw this earlier. He's part of the Age of Enlightenment, Kantism. He has a thing called Kantianism, Age of Enlightenment. He was that. He's a German philosopher, by the way. And this guy wrote a lot of stuff, the life, and Immanuel Kant. He's pretty much German idealism, epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, such as masterworks, critique, and also rationalist, empiricist, age of reason, age of enlightenment. Yep. So it's pretty much this type of guy right here. So Kantianism, so it's no need. Base of writings of the German idealist Immanuel Kant, also philosophers that have arisen from the subsequent studies of his writings, age of enlightenment. And of course, you see this a lot. So it's pretty much, you get what you can see in here. So it's not like, we talk about these things. So that's just a topic that I want to talk about. Yeah, but utilitarianism is basically, it has that moral, the greatest happiness of the greatest number. I did several streams on it, and I did pieces of it. I'm gonna mention it before I even, because I can go 2 hours with this, so we can talk about it again. I just want to talk in brief in the hours and we're in. So it's pretty much I'm seeing what you can get with her. and that's just pretty much it. But but that's basically utilitarianism, and it's just on its highest form. So it's pretty much, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna step away, y'all. I'm gonna be right back. Yeah, I'm back with it again. But basically, that's just when I talk about utilitarianism. We talk about its pure facts. I had to step away, but I'm still live. I'm talking when people just come in if they want to talk about it. Let's talk about my playlist that I talked about. I did 16. Uh, I'll say 16 videos. Some of my live stream videos, I did streams on it. Out of those 16, I did pros and cons of utilitarianism, response to utilitarianism. Most of them came from the cell phone. I did a part 3 that came from the cell phone. Epicureanism part 1 and 2, I put that under the umbrella of utilitarianism. I put that on the cell phone as part of that. And I did a whole live stream on that for 2 hours on that. And the response, I did a response to that as well. Change of construct. I think me and Gabe Abe and the legendary Wacky World O talked about this as well. And that's an hour. Y'all can watch that. Redo change of construct, Black Pill Talk. They would say Black Pill Talk because I was using the pill thing just to troll a certain individual. That was last year. Y'all can watch that. And then one last time of change of construct. I did an hour on that. Y'all can check that out as well. This is all my old StreamYard shit you all can use. Then I use open discussion about utilitarianism. Yes, y'all will see that as well. See that as well. So it's pretty much, utilitarianism. I did a pre-recording on that again. I did it like 14 minutes. Then I did explaining the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Did 7 minutes on that. And now I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm going to extend this, but I did 16 things about it. So I pretty much covered everything that's, yeah, it's a very difficult subject to talk about because most people don't touch on it. I'm the only one that touches on it. That's why people don't want to have that discussion. The other stuff I just really gonna leave alone because I already did that. I was like from last year and whatever. I'm just gonna let it be. Cause you got a lot of haters and motherfuckers that want to hate on you all day, and I ain't got time for that bullshit. I'm gonna stick to my shit, do what's best, and then just move on. Cause I see for what the bullshit what it is, man. Like I've did my part, and that's it. But but we're gonna bring that back in the fall. So pretty much, so that's pretty much it. So yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm glad I'm not doing that zodiac shit. That was a one time thing, and I stopped fucking with that. Shouts out to people that believe in that stuff. I had to cut that off. I knew my shit. I just stopped talking about it. You know, I'll try to do ribbon mics. I'm going to talk about one Wednesday stream. I'm going to talk about the history of microphones again. I'm going to talk about that as well. That's going to be, I'm going to make that a Wednesday series as well. I'm going to do a part 2 on that. I know people don't like to be talking about this shit, but fuck them. Fuck anybody else that hate. It is what it is. They can't dictate what I say. Fuck them. If they don't like, they can just cut this channel off. It's that simple, man. Like, don't waste your time if you don't like some. Change the channel, man. It is what it is. I'm not dealing with bullshit this year, and I just cleared some shit out of the air last night, and I'm feeling pretty good. So let's get back to the topic. Utilitarianism is what it is, and deontology. Deontology is what it is, of course, and that's pretty much what you see and what you get. So yeah, man, like I'm not really tripping off this stuff, you know, and we're just gonna get out of here. It's pretty much, but we got another hour or two. So it's pretty much like, when we talk about utilitarianism, I did 16 of these, but then I talked about this rival like nihilism and things like that. I don't really get into that much. I think that's on the Bill Talk, Black Pill Talk. I think I talk about asceticism. Yeah, y'all got to watch that. I talked about asceticism. That was an hour. Um, let's see, domestic political leanings. What else I got here? What I got? I got several shit. Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, that Juneteenth thing. I'm gonna talk about that this Sunday. Yeah, yeah. I was on some shit. I'm gonna clown that day. Y'all better get ready. I'm gonna clown that day. Y'all gonna get ready. How to maintain content. Knowledge is lost. Yeah, that's big. I talked about asceticism on this too. It's right before knowledge is lost in black sectors and offline. Um, that's an hour. You can watch that. Asceticism, I talked about it as well, and other philosophies. Yeah. Yeah. It was a mixed content. So knowledge build and stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty much what you can see, what you get. But like utilitarianism is a very tricky topic. Some people just don't really care for it as much as what they're seeing and what they're getting. But you get the picture. You get the picture. So it's like, salute Travis, salute. And pretty much I talk, I'm the only person that talks about it as much. And I think it's a very interesting stuff. It actually birthed a lot of liberalism and socialism if you really study the key words: happiness, numbers, greatness, and things like that. That stuff is really wild, right? So it's not far fetched to say that this stuff is wild. So you're seeing the same thing over and over again. Oh shit. Baller. Thank you. We gotta get this nigga, man. Oh shit. It's tie on. Oh damn. Let me Get this great. Man, I ain't talking about nothing. Yeah, man. I'm gonna. Yeah, even when I'm streaming, I'm gonna get that in a minute. It's pretty much it. So yeah, when you talk about utilitarianism and things like that, so yeah, he said we got a champion in the works. So but pretty much it. So I'm going to I'm gonna look at my home screen for a minute. Uh, So and not just so much of the things that we talked about. I mean, it's pretty much like you see this a lot. And then yeah, when I talk about utilitarianism, I'm the only person that speaks on it in its vivid context. So a lot of people just gonna get upset over time and things like that. So it's pretty much it. And you know, and that's to be expected, you know. And I'm just gonna look at it for what it is. So this, yeah, the Sunday, the Juneteenth edition. I'm just gonna joke about it. I'm pretty much gonna do a stream, and I found that stream I did last year, and I think it was on the day. I'm gonna pick up the day that I did this on, and I think this was at nighttime, and they made it official holiday, and I think it was on Saturday last year. But we're gonna talk about that. But another utilitarian factor. People are watching, and they seeing what they see. So it's not so much that we're talking about. It's just pretty much it, and then people just going in and do their thing. So when I talk about it as much, I pretty much said that normally people preach this stuff all day long. So it's not like I'm saying anything different. So it's like, it's what y'all speak on it, you know. So it's pretty much I'm just like in the beginning of it. So I really understand that a lot of people just gonna be like, okay, we're gonna be here, we're gonna talk about it pretty much it. And I'm just like, okay, we here, and that's just pretty much it. But like I said, the key words is happiness, greatest number on that side, and then deontology deals with the duty, the moralist view. They try to say they ain't moralists, but which they are, and then you see that a lot as well. So it's a lot of rival consequentialists on that level. So it's pretty much like, okay, we here, we do this thing, and be like, all right, we're standing by it. So it's just like we see this a lot, and I'm just like, okay, we're gonna be here and we're gonna be talking. And when I looked at Immanuel Kant's work, it's pretty much the same old 18th century shit. Then the 19th century shit is what's really holding this country back and everybody else back, because liberalism has done damage, even though it's based off the utilitarian principle. And it's pretty much why I want to do this topic tonight. And I think I appreciate people acknowledging that. So it is what it is. But when you deal with it, you deal with it at context. So it's like, I see this a lot all the time. So it's like, and that's what you hear. See, that's why I'm not really worried. You know what I mean? And that's how we're gonna do it. So I'm just like, okay, if we're gonna talk about it in its proper context, so utilitarianism is just like, you see this a lot all the time. I had to switch another mic, so I'm gonna get a darker tone. Stop sounding clear on the other one. So it's pretty much like, okay, you see people coming through, and you see other people coming through, and just like, we're gonna get this done, and the things like that. So I'm pretty much in the ballpark in that realm. So yeah, it's just like I see this a lot all the time. So I'm not really tripping what's going on in that factor. Stay up a little bit, because I had some rest earlier. So to prepare for this, today's the day, and we're gonna get this out. So we're hours in, and pretty much that's all I got on utilitarianism and versus deontology. You pretty much see the accuracy of what's going on, and I'm normally just gonna get in motion with it. So it's pretty much reputational wise. So I'm like, let's go get into it. And normally I'm just like, when I look at this stuff, it matters to some degree. So like the factors. Let's see. Let me drop this down. Let me drop this down. Versus consequentialism. Kantianism versus utilitarianism. Talk about that. John Stuart Mill. Yeah, and they just talk about these things a lot. Yeah, it's pretty much got everything that you need, and you just like, okay, we here. And I'm just like, like when we get into this stuff, and then it's like deontology versus utilitarianism, we just get in this motion right here. So you notice it's one of those properties of these things. So I'm seeing this a lot, like when people talk about these things, and he said, "Don't justify the means." The end justify the means. That's the only difference. But the difference is it talks about the happiness of the greatest number. This deals with duty. So it's pretty much basic. They have it like essays about it. So yeah, it's pretty much like I've shown and talked about. I don't go in depth on deontology as much. Problem is that it's just a lack of interest of people talking about it. And I think normally people, they just want to be seen and heard about it. So, it's gone chaos. But it's pretty much it. What the hell? Yeah. And it's just like, that's one thing. That's one thing about talking about it as much. and I get emotion and things like that. So yeah, man. And that's how people look at it. So it's pretty much what I've seen, and it's out there like that. So, and one thing I can say about deontology, like from my understanding, yeah, it deals with duty, it deals with the morality factor, and they can't deal with their own criticisms and things like that. So it's pretty much like you see what you get, you deal with it, you move on, and then you be like, all right, this is something to look at. Quiet is kept. I'm just like, fetching what the stats are, you know, I'm just looking at something real quick. So I'm just like, okay, we're gonna deal with this, and that's just like, okay, yeah, I'm looking at something real quick. Don't pay it no mind. Oh wow, they got the old controls. Yeah, thank God I'm moving that around. You do those long streams, but yeah, this is a stream that need to be said. So it's pretty much like I've covered enough. So with deontology to me, I'm just like, yeah, they deal with duty, they deal with this stuff, and then just yeah, that's just what it is. And I think me personally, you look at this stuff right away and just like, okay, we know what it is. We know what it is. And drastically changing. And I'm just like, and I was looking at it like, okay, we're going to talk about deontology. But, Immanuel Kant, I reference him a few times on certain aspects. I don't reference his teaching and studies. I reference him in research that he's commonly used a lot. Pro Hans and all these guys and liberal principles. That's if you want to talk about that stuff, you got to talk about him and those guys what they was pushing. That's the type of stuff they was pushing. So it's pretty much like you see what you get with him and you understand, and it's pretty much the same thing you get. So put this cable back in. So I'm mowing a damn lawnmower at night. They some ignorant motherfuckers. They some ignorant motherfuckers mowing in the night. They some ignorant motherfuckers. And I'm over here talking about philosophy over here as usual, but it's pretty much you see what you get. But that's what you get. So it's like, what else you gonna talk about? And that's pretty much what you see when people don't talk about this stuff a lot. But normally, the Igmore clan, they don't really broadcast this as much. And one thing I'm just saying, like, I talked about this all last year, no one was paying attention. I was just trying to get some attention and just talk about it. But arguing with people about philosophy and points like that all day on panels, I mean, these niggas just they act stupid. I really don't say much. I really don't say much. I don't say much as usual, and it's just like you get what you get. This year it's been dry, and I know people don't live stream like normally. I'm just putting some content out. I mean, people can watch it or whatever, and the shit grows. Like, this is evergreen right here. We talking about philosophies. We talking about the two main ones: classic argument, deontology versus utilitarianism, and it's pretty much like you get the two differences One deals with duty, one deals with the greatest happiness or the greatest number. One said it doesn't justify the means. It's like a moralist aspect of deontology. They're under consequentialism. The other one said it deals with the means, but there's pros and cons in utilitarianism. It creates that liberal concept. It means everything. That's what they go by. Most liberals believe that. Not all liberals are what? Deontologists. Now, conservatives like to play this moralistic role, deontology and deontologists, deontological philosophies that they be on as well. So it's pretty much, you see this a lot in these studies and in these cultures, especially in American culture, because that's the only one we know and we grew up under. But utilitarianism birthed a lot of systems. Socialism, like I said, liberalism, libertarianism. Libertarianism ain't perfect either, but you still the same old concepts being used in what? Utilitarianism and the greatest happiness of the greatest number and things like that. So utilitarianism is pretty much the concept that we see a lot. So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I know people are not listening right away, but they'll listen on the playback. So the playback is more important. So one thing for me, when I picked this topic, I felt like this is going to be a good argument and things like that. So I gave y'all the provided links in the chat, so y'all can look for yourselves or whatever. It's pretty much. I'm glad I didn't go in depth on this as much. It's nothing to be said. I said a lot last year talking about it, and it's proven what in time and time again. I was talking about things like this all the damn time, all the time. So I can play a clip for y'all to see what I'm talking about. But the next hour, and I'm gonna find this. This is my personal shit. So it's pretty much it's see what you get, and I'm just looking at it like this. So many times in so many places and phases, pretty much people are gonna say whatever. I'm gonna find something real quick. Pretty much we're gonna go by viewed playlist. All right, we're gonna go right here. Go to the library real quick and just what I'm saying, like, all right, let me see the playlist. Oh shit. Oh my god, this is a hassle. Yep, you. Yo. Go. See, watch later's. Watch later. Da 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 da. Let's go right here. Take this off. Move. And Here we go. I was trying to set something up. All right. And I'm bringing the clip out. I'm going to bring the clip out for a minute. Let's see. I'm going to get y'all the gist of what I was talking about. It all sums up. And this is what I did last year. Tell you the month. The month was in January 10th, 2010, and that's when I officially came back doing content. Yes, it got some views. Um, it's a lot. It ain't as much, but it's a lot. I'm glad it got views, and I was talking about it, pros and cons. I told you pre-recording could be crazy. I'm glad I put this on a playlist and things like that. So it's pretty much I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna big the screen up for y'all. I'm just gonna let y'all rock and roll. So I explained the pros and cons, 13 disadvantages, and I read, and it's like 21 minutes. It's pretty much what we see and what we get in so many words. So let's continue. Advantages and disadvantages of utilitarianism theory. Okay, it's by Brandon Miller, March 3rd, 2019. It's the disadvantages of it. You can find this at Green Garage blog, and that's what he talks about. Utilitarianism is a doctrine which suggests actions are correct if they are useful or to benefit the majority of the population, determining the morality or ethics of every decision relies upon the result outcome instead of of any factor involved. That means what it means, the definition of the ends. Justifying the means in any situation. There are three fundamental principles that utilitarianism follows to create an ethical structure for society. Actions are only right if the consequences of them maximize whatever is good or anything that is bad. The only thing that is good in society is happiness. Actions are only correct if they can maximize pleasure for the majority of everyone. When we look at the definition of utilitarianism, there are some assumptions that must be made. We must believe that happiness is good for an individual in the first place. There must okay, there must be a desire within society to pursue what would be considered something that creates that reaction. By doing so, the idea is that the suffering could be reduced because we are all working together to create a world that is mutual happy. And here we go. These are critical utilitarian pros and cons to review. We're looking at the definition of this theory. Here's the list of utilitarianism. Here's the list of the pros of utilitarianism. Okay. Number one, we get to focus on happiness as a society. The reason why utilitarianism is a popular theory is due to the fact that it puts happiness as the central reason for our existence. When we look at societies around the world today, it is clear that people are not experiencing this emotion. People tend to feel happier when they have access to moral financial resources. They also tend to experience this more often when there are fewer worries about the future of employment. In a world where utilitarianism is the primary emphasis of each action, we could reduce unemployment rates and improve household incomes because we would be looking at the effects instead of the process for the results. Yep, it's a popular one. And here's number two. It teaches us that harming other people. At this part, you see how I was reading officially. This is came in from a cell phone, by the way. This is shot with a cell phone last year, and it's been a year. And to notice the difference of audio, what I sound like now and from now, still read good. See, sometimes it's a projection, and when you have that high velocity talking, you're going to speak kind of clearly. So it's pretty much like you see this a lot, like in content has changed, but I was doing pre-records a long time ago and then doing stuff like this. I love doing this. And I explained the second part in just a minute. And I showed you the first part I just read. You heard what it says about utilitarianism. It's very, very important. So it's pretty much you see what you get on this one. So I'm going to switch a little bit, because I know y'all don't like this darker tone, but I'm going to switch back and forth. But y'all give me 1 second. Yeah, it's just you see this one thing about it. You know, one thing I can tell y'all about utilitarianism is like you know you're gonna get good results. You're gonna get fantastic results when me talking about it. And I feel like when I did this, it was on the 10th of January of last year. I'm trying to figure out what day did I do it on, because this is very important. I want to get y'all the context of what what I was going through coming back doing content again. It was my very first time. Someone told me in the chat room, "Are you doing content again?" I said yes, and because I tend to do it last year because being a panelist is something. It's just what it is, and I realized like you pretty much sum up when I was coming from. Like I pretty much sum up when I was coming from. You gotta understand something. Doing this is not easy, man. Like you do this stuff a lot. It's pretty much we hear, and that's pretty much like what you see right now. So let's see what month did I? Okay, it was on the 10th of January, right? It was on a Sunday. It was on a Sunday. It was a Sunday of last year to January 10th, 2021. It was on and this is before I even did Sunday Madness or anything else. This was pre-recorded, y'all. Back then in 2021. This is where I didn't even meet everybody yet on the other side, but 2021 was an interesting year. It was a great year for me coming back as a content creator. So it's pretty much I'm just like solid all the way through. Yeah, my birthday was on that Sunday too, because I'll never forget that year as well. But last year, so that's a whole nother. We in June right now, so it's been a year since we're doing this now. Today's June 15th on a Wednesday night. It's 10:03, about to be 10, 2 hours in. But I'm gonna let y'all hear the rest of this, and that's all I just want to clear up. But this was on shot on a Sunday on my actual cell phone. I'd be streaming outside, blog streaming, and you see how good I sound without a microphone. This one just amplifies it, what I'm using right now. But this right here shows I still had good audio and still got some views. So it's just a preference and choice of what I choose to do my content. So, anyways, but utilitarianism is just like I explained this last year. No one was looking at that. So again, we're gonna hear what I have to say on the rest. Hold on a second. This Okay, let's back from the top again. It teaches us harming other people is wrong, but anyone can define a personal moral definition, then argue it for within the rest of their community. What utilitarianism teaches is that our definition of morality and ethics comes from a common base perspective instead of an individual outlook. There may be choices that makes us happy as an individual. It shows us that harming others for the sake of our benefit is not a helpful approach. Utilitarianism, number three, okay, utilitarianism is an easy theory to implement. So it's not a helpful approach. Yeah, that's what they're trying to tell you about it. This is the pros of it. Utilitarianism is an easy theory to implement. There's only one process focused on when implementing a society that functions from the foundations of utilitarianism. Happiness, all we need to do is to make this theory work together in a majority of group and then work to determine what the positive or negative effects of each choices would be.
This decision-making process is something that we all do from our first days of childhood. Incorporating it to a group of theory is naturally a natural step forward. Yep, that's the third part, how you implement it. And number four is a secular system that focuses on humanity. One of the most significant struggles of humanity faces when looking at life from a societal perspective is our vision of spirituality. According to various estimates, that there are roughly 4,200 different religions being practiced in our world right now, trying to pin down what someone considers a spiritual belief and what another person would think to be a scientific fact can be challenging. When we place the focus each moral decision based on happiness alone, then we eliminate the inconsistencies within the curve. Excuse me. When focusing on the supernatural deity from an individual's perspective. Yeah, that's number four. The secular talks about that. And number five, utilitarianism seeks to create the highest good. Although in a perfect world we would want to see everyone would have an equal happiness and opportunities, there is enough of a difference within our various subgroups that can make this impossible to achieve. That's why utilitarianism focuses on the majority as a group for happiness instead for everyone. When we are pursuing the ideas that bring the maximum level of joy into our lives, then we are limiting the potential for harmony to occur in our families and communities and overall culture. Yep, that's why utilitarianism is very difficult. It's an extreme side. It does talk about the deontology of it. I got a list of here, and I will break these down in a minute. And the consequentialism in it, and consequences of any action, yeah, right or wrong, yes, it's constructive. And consequentialism, such as egoism and altruism, utilitarianism considers the interests of all humans equally. That's like I've written down. Yeah, this is about utilitarianism, 13 advantages and disadvantages of a system like this, because I've seen this on a video of, I think, the BGS Igmore, when he mentioned the black pill, the two ideologies of the utilitarian, the nihilist and the utilitarian philosophies. They are extreme sides. So this is a series that I want. I'll make another series on it in the future, in the spring or something. But here we go. Utilitarian seeks to create the highest good. Although in a perfect world we would want to see everyone have an equal happiness and opportunities, there is enough of a difference within our various subgroups that can make this impossible to achieve. That's why utilitarianism focuses on the majority as a group for happiness instead for everyone. When we are pursuing ideas that bring in a maximum level of joy into our lives, then we are limiting the potential for harm to occur in our families, communities, and overall culture. Yep, it's an extreme side. It's construct life, what you want in happiness, and it's very constructive. It's to build. Everybody can do that. That's why this philosophy, if you say it's black pilled, it's very difficult for people to do. And let's read number six. It focuses on the democratic process for the forward movement. In a typical democracy, the passages of legislation or the election of the representative occurs when there is 50% plus one. Vote the majority. We use this structure because it is seen as being the fairest solution to balance the different interests that everyone has for their lives. All modern government structures, which features democratic principles, uses this philosophy. That means we're already using principles of this theory to create happiness in our lives. Now we just need to take the next step forward to apply it outside of government. That's very hard to do. Okay, number seven, we focus on the objectivity, universal solutions. The reason why utilitarianism offers such as a promise as a societal approach is because it incorporates universal ethics in objective manner. We can accurately measure the positive and negative consequences of each actions we decide to take a group of the process. Okay, let's see here. It's kind of hurting a little bit. Hold on. Okay. Process. Forgot where I was at. The reason why utilitarianism, okay, the objective manner, consequence of which action we decide to take on the group, it process which allows us to create an independent way of determining what is wrong, what is right and wrong from a moral or ethical perspective. These principles apply across the board in all human societies. Yeah, that's 7 pros of utilitarianism. There's 7 pros I just read of utilitarianism. It has its positives and negatives. Okay, the pros of utilitarianism. It has its negatives, but this is the pros I just read. Okay, here's the cons. Right. Let's see. Okay. All right. Here's cons. We do not consider any other element besides happiness. Utilitarianism only focuses on the majority of happiness as a way to determine ethics and morality. Essentially, that we remember that are other forms of value. To consider, we're looking at the overall experience of what it means to be human. Love is something which offers the tremendous value, but it also can cause extraordinary heartbreak. We eat foods like kale because we know that it is a healthier choice to eating Twinkies every day, even we prefer to do the latter because it makes us feel better. There are decisions that we make every day that look at a long term perspective rather than how we feel in the moment. Utilitarianism has some benefits, but it also ignores a lot of our life experiences. That's why it's an extreme side. I have to be careful with this ideology. I did some mild research on it, still learning about it, but utilitarianism, it's got a few 7 pros to it, but the cons, a society most people ain't ready for. It is an extreme side. Yes, it's very difficult to practice because you got a lot of people thinking it's a good way to do it. It's an extreme ideology. I recommend people doing the research on deontology and cantology, versus utilitarianism. There's probably videos like that on YouTube. So this one, I'm just making a reference. There's the pros and cons to utilitarianism. Okay, it creates an unrealistic perspective for society. That's number 2. Imagine the scenario: there are 8 people right now who would benefit from having your organs. We're looking at principles of utilitarianism. The balance of happiness of over harm supports the idea of putting you to death. Improve the satisfaction of everyone else. Why? Because you are not in that majority. If there are 8 other people and you make 9, the chances are that everyone else will vote to save themselves as a group at the expense of your life. That is why the ends can never justify the means. It makes it too easy for the majority of people in society to create harm using balancing principles. The happiness of the minority must also come into consideration. Exactly. This is why you can't have a society like that. There will always be an elite class for this to happen. This is one of the cons of it. This is number 2. Number 3, we're going to read. Utilitarianism can be unpredictable. It's very unpredictable. I believe that. It's predictable in some ways, but it's very unpredictable. I like what he said. When the last time you were able to predict the future accurately? There are times when we can take an educated guess at what is going to happen, but it's very rare to receive a premonition about the future event that actually comes true. That means it is incorrect to base ethical choices about what may or may not happen tomorrow. We must focus on what happens now in this moment to determine what path we can pursue to create and improve a society. If we are only looking at potential, then there is a possibility that we could achieve nothing. also relies on people making a consistent decisions. But if there's one thing that humans are good at doing, it is changing their mind. And this is number 4 I'm reading. I just read that utilitarians can be unpredictable, and it also relies on people making consistent decisions. If there's one thing that humans are good at doing, it is changing their mind. You cannot trust anyone to ask the greater good if the majority decides to get rid of all the other structures which support societal health and wellness. The average person will act selfishly whenever they are faced with difficult decisions, no matter what their upbringing or spirituality happens to be. Why do people follow religions in the first place? The goal of being saved isn't initially to help anyone else find some level of the internal salvation. It is to create life insurance policies for the unpredictable future, because that is what offers the comfort to the soul. This process would have happened immediately if society shifted to utilitarianism, which it won't happen because you got religions, you got secret society religions like Freemasonry and all that. It deters what we believe. To have this society, it's very black pill. I give him that. But it has a lot of cons. It is an extreme size to nihilism. I may do a video on that. Don't count on me making it, but this is a response to the ideology of black pill and the utilitarianism side of it. There's some pros and cons to it. So again, this is showing what it is. You can find this website, greengarageblog.org, and it says the 13 advantages and disadvantages of utilitarianism theory. Okay. Okay. Number 5. Number 5. Utilitarianism relies on multiple definitions of happiness. Every person has different definition of happiness. Although we can find a common ground on the specific things, it is virtually impossible to see two people with the clone perspectives about the world today. Humans are complex beings. What makes one person happy can make another individual feel bored or out of touch with their life. That means we are faced two choices. We could either find common ground with our experience to compromise on a definition of happiness, or only allow the description of the majority to exist. That is very true and factual. Okay, number 6, it creates the potential for the majority to rule through tyranny. Okay, this is a good one. Excuse me for a minute. I'm about to read this. Okay. It creates the potential for the majority of the rule through tyranny. People who self-identify as being evangelical in the United States do not support the idea of same-gender marriage at the level of 67%, although the younger evangelicals support the idea as a majority at 53%. Significantly, the population of older adults skews the overall percentages. Now, the image that the laws were being created based on the concept of utilitarianism in this population group. If you identify as an LGBTQIA, an individual in this society, you will be unable to get married. There will be nothing you can do about it, either until enough people were swayed to come over to your position. Just because the majority of the population believes something is right does not make it an ethical choice. That thought process kept women from voting for centuries, permitted slavery to exist, allows for children trafficking and exploitation still today. Many more activities that harm others in some way. That is why happiness cannot be permitted to be the foundation of societal pursuits. Sometimes the correct choice is not too popular. Is sometimes the correct choice is not the popular choice. That's right. That is number 6 of utilitarianism. That's one of the cons of it. The pros and cons of utilitarianism shows us that there is a time and place where these principles are offer potential benefit to society. The issue here is that the advantages cannot balance out the likelihood of harm that would exist at the end of the day. It does not make into account how many people in a minority position factor into that society. Exactly right. Just like the people at the top. They are either forced to pretend to be happy or allow themselves to be exploited for the greater good. Exactly. And this is by the author. Brandon Miller has a BA from the University of Texas of Austin. He is a seasonal writer who has written over 100 articles, which has been read by over 500,000 people. If have any comments, concerns about this blog, post this, please contact Green Garage. That's where I get this information from. Fair use for it about utilitarianism. And I've seen this mentioned in the Black Pill conversation by Mr. BGS himself. And people go by denialistic behavior. Utilitarianism is very important. It's an extreme side. I got it written down as well about the total and average. Now, the total is a method of applying it. It all applies what I just said in the video. And it gives a group thing. It's a group thing. The best sets of the outcomes would be, and there's just a problem with mere addition of the paradox with a consistent method of total utilitarianism. That's the total. Now here's the rule. There's three sets of it. You got total utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism and average utilitarianism. Is a form of utilitarianism that says an action is right as it conforms to a rule that leads to the greatest good or that of the righteousness of wrongness of particular action is a function of the rule of which is an instance. Yep, that's the rule. And the average, of course, views by the maximization of the average utility among a group members. And it says 100 people to 100 heathens. That means happiness points is judged as preferably to a group to 1,000 people to 99 to heathens. Yeah, it factors in what I said. I got it written down. It is to construct, yes, but it has a lot of disadvantages. Six of them. Add six plus seven. That add six plus you add six plus seven cons on this. Okay, you got 13. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I'll end it at that. Peace, people, and shalom.
Yep. That's it. That's it. It's pretty much, what I said. And he said, "You're doing content now." I'm gonna read this part. I said, "Yep, just a little something I've been researching, doing more time in the spring and summer." See, I was trying to get back into it. And this is last year. I wrote to him. He could testify it. But again, it's pretty much like what y'all just heard. Like, that was my intention. I should have came back last year, but I didn't think this was going to be a little bit easier, and I started doing it more often. It's just what it is. It's just what it is. All much respect to your information, man. But that's the thing about me. I understand that when we know we're coming back, it's 2 hours in, so I might end this in a few minutes. But it's pretty much like I've talked about a lot, and I'm glad I'm bringing this topic in because tomorrow I'm gonna be doing something totally different. So it's pretty much what you see now. So I'm back to my clear voice now to take the darkness out of the other one. So it's pretty much it. So with that said, I'm gonna say peace and shalom, everybody. Have a good night. I'll see y'all on the network of DTN, the final finale. I'll say DTN 12, and that's like a spring edition. It's pretty much it. So with that, I'm gonna say peace.